No, please, please don't hurt me. Okay, all right. I'm going to tell you why I changed from DSLR to mirrorless. Okay, you can relax. I'll tell you. Digital, it was a thing. It was coming, we could see it coming. Apple did the quick take camera. It was like $4 million for like half a megapixel. But it was coming. Then Sony, then Kodak, they were all doing little bits and pieces. And I'm going to show you some of my original cameras right here.
This is the first digital camera I ever bought. It's the Kodak DC265. I think it was 1.7 megapixels. 1.7 megapixels. Cost me almost $2,000 in about 1998 or 1999. The DC 4800, 3.1 megapixels. I got this in 2001. Cost me about $2,100. 3.1 megapixels. Not bad. Not bad. I could actually start to use this for some of my artwork. And I went to Paris that year and got some great shots.
In the mid-1990s, I'd actually created my own digital camera by using a mini DV camera and capturing and frame grabbing. And at the time, I think it was something like a 720p thing, and I was doing it. I liked the idea of not working with film because I'd been doing it so much for so long, as you can see in this film up here.
Check it out. This is the Sony. I've been buying a lot of Sonys. This is the Sony VX1000, and it was the first camera, digital camera, I ever bought, and I was doing screen grabs from this guy. It's a video camera, but yeah, cool. Let me know if you'd like me to make a film about this. It's pretty cool, old school. Bought it in New York in 1997. That's how old it is, and it's shot on mini DV tapes.
And I was already exploring that in the mid-90s. So this was a theme for me. I got all these pocket cameras, but still buying a digital SLR was just way too expensive. Kodak made them, Nikon made them, Canon made them. There were a few around, but they were too expensive. Ultimately, the reason why I changed was very, very simple. There was a convergence between quality and price. That happened to me in 2004 with the Nikon D3. This was a 6 megapixel cropped sensor camera. Now at the time, it was extraordinarily exciting to just now be able to go out and shoot. You could just shoot. Now, because I was from the film days, it didn't mean that I just went off and sprayed and prayed. I didn't know anything about that because I was from the film era, but you could shoot. And you didn't have to go buy film and you didn't have to develop it, and then boom, it was just straight into Photoshop. But there was a problem. The Nikon D70 was a great camera, but it wasn't surpassing film yet. So I very carefully eased it into my professional world, photo shoots, and into my publishing world, greeting cards, postcards, and gift cards. And I just started doing calendars. Actually, I'd started doing calendars a couple of years before that. And one of my biggest goals with the digital was, could I create a file that looked like a black and white neg from the digital? Because that was what was most important to me. I didn't want to disrupt my customers and disrupt my workflow, which was all film, and a lot of it was black and white neg. So rather than going all digital and crazy colors, I tried to subdue it and bring the files back to looking like they were more authentic. And only having 6 megapixels, well, that wasn't much to play with. The files were something like 3000 by 2000 pixels, whereas my scanner at the time, the Nikon Coolscan 4000 ED that we talked about also in this video here, same video, it was something like 4500 pixels, so it was actually higher res than this camera. Interesting, isn't it? It didn't have the dynamic range, and it wasn't so good at color, like just at rendering color. It wasn't so good at high ISO, disaster, but it was a beginning. 2007, the Nikon D2X. Most expensive camera, and from my perspective, disappointing because it cost so much money. It was still cropped. High ISO above 400 was unusable, maybe 800 at a pinch. And you know, here it cost me $10,000, like $980 for this camera, which really wasn't great. So from about, I think from about 2005 through to 2007, I had the D2X. The files, if you shot in daylight and in certain conditions, were now starting to be on par. It was 12 megapixels, on par with film. It was now 12 megapixels, 4,000 by 3,000, roughly. But then the Nikon D3 came out, and what Nikon did is create a camera where they thought about the science of film, and so the files didn't really look digital anymore. They looked like film. There was something that Nikon did. And not only was the D3 looking like film, but it was full frame. It was 12 megapixels. Suddenly those pixels were of a higher quality. Suddenly you could shoot at 1600 and 3200 ISO instead of being stuck at 400. Really, don't go to 800, there's no point. The world changed. When did I move from DSLR to mirrorless? Let's first start with some definitions. The first definition is mirrorless is what we're talking about here is a detachable lens camera without a mirror, because obviously there's lots of digital cameras that don't have a mirror, but their lenses don't detach. I've had tons of them, and they're not full frame, they're not 35mm. The first camera, mirrorless camera that I purchased was in 2013. I purchased a Sony A7R. Now the reason I purchased the Sony A7R was because I love the idea of removing the mirror box. I loved the idea of taking out this space and having a camera that was much more compact. At the time, a D800 or a D4, which was the cameras that I had, they were big and heavy cameras. Great, I don't mind using them as a professional. I'm not complaining about the weight or the size in no way, shape or form. But I was a guy that did a lot of nighttime streetscape photography, and I was a person who just captured almost every second of my life. So it was actually what I was looking for, because I'd bought lots of Canon pocket cameras because I believed in the 2000s, the noughties, they made the best pocket cameras to just have in your pocket, pull out. They could be fully manual. Cameras like the S80, the S90, was it the C10? Can't remember its number. I'll show those to you because I have them all still.
And the pocket cameras I was talking about, that's the Canon S90. You could look absolutely tiny. You could stick it in your back pocket. It was fully manual, and I've got some of my most famous shots, high-selling shots from this tiny little camera. Canon were great. And then after that one, I got this one. That's the G9.
Great cameras, but they were always crop sensors. They were always non-detachable lenses, you know, all that stuff. And then finally we had a camera that was pretty small, not quite as small as those, but pretty small, much smaller than the other ones. It was a full 35mm sensor. It was supposed to be the same one that was in the D800, and I could take lenses off and put them on. So I could use this, not only run and gun at night, parties, capturing the world, streetscape photography, all that stuff, but I could use it as a professional camera. It's 2013. Sony have got a good name. They've been doing electronics forever. I bought this camera. It seems to have been proven that yes, the D800 and this camera had the same sensor. But Sony, in their infinite wisdom of trying to create uniformity and formats, they crippled the raw files. And what they, in the original version, in the launch version of the A7R, they gave us a compressed raw file, and they basically did a version of a JPEG where they threw away the data that you couldn't see. So the shadow areas and the highlight areas were being partially thrown away in order to keep the file sizes acceptable. Whereas with the Nikon D800, I had full access to all of the dynamic range, the shadows and the highlights. So I literally had these two cameras with exactly the same sensor, and I was like, in the beginnings, I was like, what? Why are these outcomes so different? I've got 36 megapixels, everything looks similar. when you're in daylight and you're not looking in the shadows, and then I go into the shadows and it all falls apart. I did a lot of reading, a lot of searching, and eventually I found out that Sony had crippled the RAW files. Because of the type of shooting I do, that kind of ruined that camera largely for me for almost all of my work. And after about a year of trying to work with it, I put it on the shelf. It's just the way it was. The A7R II came out a few years later, and it was a bit of an upgrade. And after 6 months or a year of it being launched, Sony announced that they were giving us real RAW files. By the time we'd gotten to that point, I just decided, for the time being, I would hold off on mirrorless. I didn't feel the camera had improved or changed enough based on the A7R, the original, to entice me back. But from 2013, that was 2015, we get to 2017, and I'm seriously wanting to work in the YouTube space. I've been shooting on my DSLRs and on various different cameras on the A7R. I've been shooting my videos on that. Go watch some of the old ones. They're shot on these old cameras. But they're old. They're all 1080p. Their focusing systems are not as good. In the case of the Nikons, all of the DSLRs, you cannot have auto face detect, and it's reliable. So I was looking for a hybrid camera that I could use to shoot with, a mirrorless. And lo and behold, in the first part of 2017, Sony announced the A7R III. It had gone from 36 megapixels of the A7R up to 42 megapixels. So that meant it was on par with my D850 at 45, so I could slide it into my professional world and it'd be similar for a client. It had great video spec, face detect, etc. All worked fantastically. And at the same time I was looking at that camera, and I have to add, I looked at every camera known to man to become my YouTube hybrid video / stills camera, because I wanted to do both. I wanted to be out in the field, and if I was shooting videos, I could also shoot high quality stills at the same time that I was used to. So I could just interchange. That's what I wanted. I mean, why buy a camera just for video when it can do everything, if you can get it? The A7R III looked like a great bet. There are rumours that Nikon are working on mirrorless cameras, but at the time the rumours were they were not going to be out until the end of 2019/2020, so just 6 months ago. And it was like, I can't wait a year and a half, 2 years, so I'll invest in this for now. I've already got 3 or 4 Sony lenses from my A7R, off we go. I got that camera and I took it with me on our family's world trip, and I shot 99% of what we did with that camera, and I got to really use it for video, for stills. Check out this video up here, which is basically a video montage of my trip. Some beautiful stuff captured on the A7R III. So this was probably the first time I fully embraced mirrorless. But I'm sorry, Sony users. As a guy who's worked with lots of different cameras, there was quite a number of things about the Sony, which I've talked about in numerous videos, and I don't want this to be an anti-Sony video, because it's not, because I think the Sony is fantastic for some people, and it's fantastic for some people's use cases. But for me, in direct comparison to the D850, there were pros and cons. Of course there's pros and cons. D850 sucks at video, Sony doesn't. But there were pros for the Nikon system. So I was like, well, it's good and it's doing the job. And then within like about 6 weeks, literally 6 weeks of me spending $5,000 on the A7R III, the Z6 and the Z7 are announced. And we find out the spec. We find out that it's the same, basically the same size sensor that's in the D850. So that means it slots perfectly into my world. It's got the same color science as my 2 D850s, so it fits perfectly into my world. It fits my batteries. It fits all my F lenses. It fits all my SB flashes. It's got very similar ergonomics. It's got the same level of weather sealing. On and on and on. Obviously, these cameras fit into my use case far better than any other camera. This is not an anti-Sony thing. It's any other camera system. Of course it's going to fit better because of batteries and lenses and flashes, ergonomics, menus. Everything is similar or the same. Ridiculous. The Z7 arrived. I purchased it. I started working with it with the same level of enthusiasm and professionalness, as in I could use it side by side with my professional equipment, and it worked the same, and it worked just as well in some cases, and the files were the same, and there was no disruption for anybody or clients. It's just seamless. Batteries could be interchanged, lenses could be interchanged, etc., etc. So I would say, and I think I got that camera late 2018. It was something like September, October 2018. I got the Nikon Z7. That's the date that I moved to mirrorless, but I still shoot DSLR when the moment requires. It's not very often these days. So I suppose to conclude with this, I definitely use the Nikon Z mirrorless cameras, and I got a Z6 to become a second camera. So there's the Z6, right? I don't know which one's the Z6. This light is so bright, doesn't matter. They're both fantastic cameras, so that we could do exactly this sort of thing. And I've got a Z50 as well, because sometimes we shoot 3 cameras and we have C-roll as well as B-roll. I love these cameras. They have like everything that I thought that they would be, they have been. Because I read the specs, I understood the specs, there's been no surprises and there has been no disappointments whatsoever. Any shortcomings that some people might think that these things have, like let's say 1 card slot, well, I bought these cameras full well knowing that. Never was a problem for me, never been a problem. Love these cameras, they're robust, as I just talked about in this episode here. I actually dropped my first lens and camera and it survived, and we are shooting on it right now. That is it right there. So that is the Z6 with the 20mm. I can only say that when the Z8, when the professional version of these cameras arrive, it's going to be a really exciting time, because for now almost 2 years of working with these cameras, I'm very impressed with everything from the lenses, the mount, the color science. Love XQD. I would never go back from XQD. Focus is fine. The video is spectacular. Like, I am loving the files that just come out straight onto the cards, even in camera. Obviously, we can do even better if we go off to an Atomos Ninja or something like that. So I have fully embraced mirrorless. I use it the majority of the time, and DSLR very rarely. Just depends. There it is. Well, as usual, everybody, thank you so much for being here. Now, if you have any questions about any of that, what's your experience? Have you gone from DSLR to mirrorless? Are you thinking about it? Will you never do it? I would love to hear your stories. Please share. Yes, and please like this video. I'd love you to like it, then it gets out to the world. And if you want to watch some more stuff of See Me, you might not, I don't know. There's over 200. Just click on the Meta one down there. Okay, it's so good to see you. I've got to get out of this bright light. Okay, bye.